All right, rolling. Okay. Yep, sounds pretty good. Yep, sync. Yep. We're in there. Okay, sick intro. All right, what makes video games, board games different? Why are these games so fun to us? We're gonna answer that question in this tentatively placed together discussion. Yeah, so this is the video about what makes board games so fun? What makes them different from video games? Because that's the traditional medium of entertainment. Yeah, because if you say gaming on YouTube, everyone thinks you're talking about video games and not board games. Yes, we are very guilty of this too. That's like the mainstream. You type gaming in anything on Google, whatever the heck, and it's like, bam, here's a bunch of video games. But board games are games too? What's going on here? And me, as a very avid pro gamer, I'm going here being like, yo, board games are sick. How come more video gamers aren't playing those board gamers? Board games. Board games. You're not playing board gamers. So yeah, I kind of want to just answer the question, like, what makes board games so fun to me? Why is it that I have such a good time just nerding out with this stuff versus just like seemingly other video gamers? Or is it just simply a problem of exposure? Let's get into my whole spiel with board games. There was a time when I was growing up, and whenever I want to play video games, because that was like the medium to do, right? Everyone want to play video games. All the Smash, Melee, Call of Duty, the Halo, you name it. And we would spend hours and hours just playing. And I wanted some of these consoles for myself, and I did get some. But every time my mom told me to play, she's like, okay, I don't want you playing by yourself. I always want you to be playing with a friend. You can play as long as you want, as long as with a friend. So that started framing like my mentality, like gaming should be like a social event. Yeah, thanks, mom.
That's not a pro gamer move.
I'd always invite people over to play games, and I realized a big hit was Mario Party. And something about the game, the downtime, the turn element, the trash talking, it just moved slowly, and it was just more fun because of that. You're able to think about things, you're able to strategize, and I like.
You're supposed to think in Mario Party?
I mean, when we were young, we did that. It was freaking fun. Anyway, so that slowly got me thinking about like more board games, chess, checkers, etc., etc. And man, they have like that aspect of it, just like, since the game is not that fast, you can like think about your friends more, you think about the interaction, think about the game, and also you're sitting literally across from each other. You can't do that in a video game. In a video game, you're sitting side by side at best. Nowadays, a lot of it is, I'm sitting in my house, you're sitting in your house.
Yeah, split screen kind of got killed off. Actually, I want to talk about it. Give me yours here. So I don't know the exact timeline for this. I'm gonna guess it started happening somewhere between the last generation of video game consoles and the current ones. So like in between your PS3 and the PS4. Split screen was a very, very big centerpiece of like the home console experience for like the longest time. It was like very just fun and cool to just be like, hey, here's a Call of Duty, here's a Halo, bring your little brother into it, give him the broken controller and just destroy him on, the split screen, right? That's kind of dying out. I don't know if it's because of because of technical limitations or because of hardware, but with the advent of playing games online with random people everywhere, there became more of an emphasis on being like, wait, we can populate entire lobbies, entire rooms full of people. You don't have to completely relegate everything to just people within your area. To have to come over to your place and have to get extra controllers for them and do everything on one system. Well, I think you also notice that because there's more of an emphasis on just this online play, because that's how you get massive communities very quickly that are also very sustainable. They started detracting more and more from split screen until eventually it wasn't even really there. I think like the biggest standpoint of this and what got people to be like, oh god, split screen is dead, is I don't remember which Halo it was. Like at some point Halo dropped split screen, which was like, oh damn. That's when it really hit people. It's like, we are in that age. I mean, there are still a lot of like couch co-ops and they're great, like Snipper Clips, like Resident Evil, and they're fun. But something about like a board game is just able to capture my attention so much longer. Because now I think a lot of split screening is, as they say, couch co-op. It's a cooperative game. So you're playing a game together, you're doing a story, and that's great. But something about like maybe my biology or something is that when I look at a screen for too long, it just kind of tires me out. I don't really like it as much. And so board games were a safe haven for me because like, you're always on the computer, dude. You're looking at social media, you're watching TV, you're playing video games, you're watching movies, you're writing papers. And so when I don't want to work and I want to like actually play with my friends, I can just chill out, sit at a table, play my good old, I don't know, Pandemic Legacy, Eldritch Horror, be immersed in that and not have to worry about screens, electronics, lag, whatever. That's a take for sure, because for me, I would say screens are very like neutral to me. I wouldn't say they tire me out, like energize me anyway. It's just like another way for a medium to interact with. But when it comes to video games, I think part of what makes me not have that perception that you have is, one, I play a lot of couch co-op, but I've also been on the other side of the coin. I played a lot of online games with my friends over things like Skype and Discord. We would be playing games like League of Legends, Counter-Strike. I definitely play a lot of Monster Hunter, Dark Souls, and Destiny with my friends. That absolutely is a thing I love doing. But part of me does also wish we could all just be in the same room. There's a part of me that I definitely miss out about. I will 100% agree with people saying that whenever you have a LAN party where you have all the gamers in the same room, that is something magical, all right? You're not really gonna be able to replicate that with having everyone behind their own screens. But having everyone behind their own screens is, at the end of the day, very accessible. It's so much easier to have everyone just be in their own houses with their own stuff than having to go over to someone else's house and have to fiddle with your controllers, like your TV settings, your settings in the game, like whatever it may be.
And then your mom doesn't come and yell at you, right? But yeah, I actually have some very fond memories of having my own League of Legends teams and going to someone's house and just playing. But it's hard to do. While playing League of Legends was really fun, like online, I felt like it wasn't really a good bang for my buck. In terms of like, I felt like I was wasting a lot of time. Even though it was fun, I felt too time consuming for me to get the same interaction with like a friend. It was still really fun though.
For me it's fun, right? But like, in terms of like the wasting time sentiment, I think I've played too many games that are very like emotional, like immersive story experiences that maybe just be like, I really got something out of this. That's the thing about games that's just like very bizarre, is that you can have so many differing experiences across different people playing the same game. If you were to compare my playthrough of Dark Souls to like some other random person's, we would tell you completely different things about the game. Maybe not so much about like some common tropes, so like, oh yeah, sure, it's hard or whatever, right? But the way we'd interact with it, what we learn from it, would probably differ very, very greatly due to the nature of just games being like, I can do whatever I want, I can put in whatever inputs, right? And I'm doing something different than that guy over there. But the medium of board games is so much more restricted than a video game. You can't literally walk around an open world doing whatever you want. You just have to do stuff that pertains to the game's rules and restrictions.
I think going off of that, board games are really good at doing non-adventure things, right? So maybe more competitive experience with like thought out rules.
I mean, I think adventures still work, but you just have to design it with the intent of, hey, we're gonna let this be very freeform, like, or at least very expansive. Like things like Seven Continents seem very promising so far, and Dungeons and Dragons is still by far the king of like role-playing adventures.
That is definitely true, yeah. Even though I wouldn't technically consider that board game in the scope of this video, but I see your point. For a board game to do something like GTA 5 and just have someone immersed inside a world for like hours and hours on end, it's really hard for them to do. Like you can't incorporate like the soundtrack, like the voices and all those things in a board game, whereas a video game can do that very easily.
Okay, so when we're talking about what makes board games fun, what makes video games fun, right? I would say the closest thing that we can do an overlap, a crossover for, is managing systems and like abilities and interactions like with some sort of like power or goal in mind. What I mean by this, right? So if you are playing, what's an example of a game that's good progression, like a board game, like maybe Dead of Winter, maybe, where it's like, oh, like as you're playing through the game, you're acquiring more items and more like allies and more stuff in general, so that by the end of it, you are stocked out with things that can do way more abilities and actions than you could at the start of the game. And in video games, that's a very common thing too. Like you will make like RPG builds, like you acquire new items, new armor, new whatever.
Yeah, like a League of Legends, right? Like the MOBA, you start over every game in the same thing.
Yeah, like both mediums have very like gamey senses of like, hey, I'm like doing this thing, I'm improving, I'm getting better at this so I can like do that thing better. Very vague statement, I know, but like that's just like a very common way of keeping people like engaged with some sort of feeling of progression as you're like interacting with a medium that you can actually have input in. What I wanted to do was focus more on the what makes some fun aspects, what can we correlate with each other, and how much can we expect it to actually be a crossover of interest. Because I know that like video games, if we're trying to attack people who are solely board gamers, especially like older people, that's gonna be a big problem.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, like, because video games are already such like a learned thing you have to like know how to do. Like you can't just give someone a controller and be like, all right, cool, you know what inputs is, you know how to play the game. Like no, you have to like get very comfortable with how to interact with the medium. And I don't want kind of just doing whatever. I look like one of those guys in a fucking like ad being like, guys, I'm gaming so hard.
No, it's actually like they don't have like that learned muscle memory either. It's like what am I pressing it right? Like what is an X button? Am I pressing it? Like am I doing a thing? Or like also it's the screen thing, right? Like I've given like a controller to a lot of my family friends. Even if they do understand how to use a controller, they're like, wait, what? I can't see, it's going too fast.
Oh yeah, you definitely like need to learn how to like turn this into like an extension of yourself. So if you want to do it in a movie, you just do it.
That takes time, yeah. Because remember, video games are mostly real time.
Yeah, they're supposed to be immersive, not supposed to be thinking about what you're doing, you're supposed to be just doing it. That's how like most games were intended to be designed and played. They don't like design many games that account for people like moving and what does that button do? Like, Yeah. It's more like, oh frick, there's like a building coming out to like run and dodge it and move at the same time. Like,
Yeah, it's like when you're playing a game, you're not thinking of, oh, I gotta press the B button. You're thinking of, oh, I need to jump.
yeah, so then on that end, it makes sense to me that there's not too many like older generation board gamers into video games, but then why aren't there more video gamers that are into board games? Because there's a lot of overlap there, and we've seen it with our own groups, because we have a lot of people in our group that are they're gamers, but the things they've learned from video games, a lot of the systems of like the RPG stats, like whatever you wanna like bring into video games that's like a knowledge-based nerdy thing, you can bring that into board games. Like especially if you're playing games like Civilization, League of Legends, like any like RPG like video game that involves just a lot of numbers, counting, and just builds, you can apply a lot of that knowledge over into board games. It's kind of crazy because I remember a lot of like my early experiences with us playing board games, a lot of it was just me applying what I've learned from video games into board games, and it works very well. I'll consider myself like really good at playing board games. I like usually top in like the
Win rate?
yeah, I have a pretty good win rate when I'm playing board games with friends. It's like very surprising me.
If you like Civilization, the video game, please check out Civilization board game. I think you will enjoy it. So there's like a really weird real-time aspect when it comes to board games and video games, because on one hand, video games are so good at doing real-time, and board games, when you look at these aren't really real time at all. You have your turn, you have certain actions to do in a turn, you do see that. But there's one game called Throw a Burrito. Now this game is entirely real time, and I think it just does it so well. So man, there's that such a strange disconnect between turns and real time, because when you think of a board game, it's almost always, oh, you have your turn, you do this. Now it's changing, it's not.
Yeah, it's definitely like something I didn't bring up. It's yeah, like video games, you can make them turn-based or real-time, and that's like something really cool about the medium. But board games, when you think of them, they're usually like turn-based, because when you do real-time things in real life, that's when you start turning things into sports and not really like stuff confined to a table.
It's like it's also like, as we were talking off the record, when you're playing a real-time game, there's so many things you have to control for that the designers didn't control for. It's like the table, the sitting at the table. Whereas when you're playing a video game, you just have to account for, oh, everyone has the same controller, right? The environment's in the game. And when you're looking at like esports, it's pretty standardized. You bring your own controller and your own mouse, sure, but everything else is pretty standardized. And now sports, which would be like the closest thing to a real-time board game, they have to control for so many things. They have an indoor gym, they have to make sure the AC is at a certain level, the ball has to be pumped up to a certain degree. There's so many things.
Yeah, there's so many like just weird factors in reality. They kind of just be like, okay, I'm gonna go with a tentative feeling as how that's supposed to work out. As an example, like when you have referees in sports, right? Like you have to have someone who kind of enforces the rules and kind of has to make a judgment call. But in the video games, it's like, oh, well, I mean, everything is confined to how the game literally just works. So you don't really have to deal with that unless someone's hacking.
Or I do want to talk about this game.
This is a meme.
This is hilarious. It's Monopoly, but Fortnite. So we're already seeing the crossover with the video games and the board games. I'm sure this has happened in the past, but this is such a cultural phenomenon. I feel like this is gonna make waves for kids. I just wish like in the future it's...
Well, main thing is kind of cheating because it's Monopoly. If it was like they made a Fortnite board game on its own, then I would like more jump on what you're saying, but like everyone knows what Monopoly is.
You know, the company South Park, the studio South Park, they made a bunch of video games. They have like 2 RPGs that are out. The next step is maybe a board game, because the designers of South Park love board games. Let's talk about like lying and bluffing, because when you think of lying and bluffing and in terms of a table, you're gonna think of poker and maybe Mafia/Werewolf. Now, the thing about video games that's really hard to get as opposed to a board game can do easily is the bluffing element. When someone's sitting across the table, they have tells, their voice gets pitched a certain way, their eye like twitches, they hold the cards a certain way. It's so engrossing. And especially if you add a role play into the mix, it's just such a fun experience. Where video games, yeah, you can do voices, but again, if you're not sitting in the same room, you're really not gonna get a lot of those tells.
Yeah, the tells are very different. So like the way I'll describe it is, have you ever like seen games like Trouble in Terrorist Town? No, what I'm thinking of is a lot of like Gmod games, so people will know what I'm talking about. Like if you watch like Scene Anners and like Mr. Fruit and those YouTubers, like they play a lot of these games where there's like a trader or like some sort of like line mechanic, and like a group has to like progress through a bunch of levels, kind of working together, but they have to figure out who's the like traitor amongst them. The tells that end up happening, you know, obviously aren't gonna be like the ones you'd find in reality where you can look at someone's face and be like, oh, look at that. I'm making expressions. You can tell like more context behind literally just anything I'm saying and doing because you can see me in person. But in a game, things get really different and weird. It ends up becoming way more contextual based on what actions are doing in the game. less so than very minute details in expression. Yeah, it's just, I would say it's like a different experience because the tells in reality are so much more nuanced, but in a game, it's gonna be way more like people just acting even weirder than they normally do.
Do you have anything else to add? I think we answered the question, kind of.
Yeah, I think we touched on it quite a bit. Yeah, I think like it's just, at the end of the day, it's just like, yeah, it's the difference between, you know, a cardboard medium and a digital one, right? So
yeah, I mean, especially if you're playing a game primarily on a table as opposed to a screen.
yeah, like to answer my original question, I think that it's more of an exposure problem as to why more video gamers aren't playing board games. Because it totally makes sense why there's not that many board gamers playing video games, but like the vice versa, I feel like should be happening more. Or maybe because video games have no friends. But anyways, yeah, that's gonna be it for this discussion video. I don't really know what to even call this, but yeah, hope you guys enjoyed listening to us talk about this. And what are your thoughts on video games and board games? You got anything interesting to say about this? Go ahead and leave it down below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, let us know if any video games remind you of board games or vice versa. I know we brought up Civ. That's a great one. I love that game so much.
There's a lot of video games that you could straight up just make into board games.
Yeah, dude. If there's anything I missed or any games like Throw Burrito or Sheriff of Nottingham, please let us know because we like to check out those games too.
And with that, we will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.